Welcome back to DajibanLife. And today, as you can see, I've moved some of my stuff over already. I didn't film a lot of kind of stuff in between stuff I did, but as you can see, I have my my solar lines, my power lines coming in from the solar panels. I managed to move the solar panels from the other van onto this van, but got the battery in here now. I got the fridge posted up. It's not hooked up yet. I'm not hooking up any electrical until I think I'm gonna build my bed first out of aluminum, and I have all the pieces for that. Got some square tubing and some L, what do you call it, L channels or L something. Anyway, I got that, so it's gonna go across like that, and then once that's done, then I can start working on the wiring here and cleaning that up. Let's see, I have all the interior trim back in, so yeah, that's looking nice and finished for the most part. Up here it's kind of dirty, just because I taped off certain places and the bed liner didn't get everywhere, and then the trim pieces don't cover, but that's fine, I don't really care that much. But yeah, definitely I'm gonna have to sound deaden this part of it, of the van. You can see I got my backup camera, receiver unit in. I don't have the camera itself hooked up yet, so I got to do that. A bunch of wires hanging down because I did finish moving the stereo over here on my sub. There's something electrical going on with that though, because the speakers kind of come on and off sometimes, so I'm thinking there's a bad ground somewhere. The van in general has like a bad ground, it seems like, so I'm gonna probably go in and clean up the ground line wherever that is, but I'll do that probably next week. This week what I'm working on is this. So these are shock extenders that I've taken apart. They're made for a Chevy truck, I think, but basically they used to go something like that with this thing in the middle, but they don't fit the van. So what I decided to do, since I ordered them already, was to just cut it apart and re-weld them where, you know, it would make sense. So I'm gonna probably put them back together or something like this, right? Because I took some measurements, I made some markings here on the thing where the bar should go, right? To weld that back together, hopefully using my Harbor Freight welder, which isn't very good, but I'll just like glop it on there, just so I know that the weld holds. And then yeah, I'll have some shock extenders, and because I have shock extenders, that means that I'll be lowering the back of the van. And so here you can see I've already taken off the 3500 springs off my old van and reinstalled the stock springs on there, the 1500 springs. They're not seated well, but I don't plan on driving this van, so whatever. Because if I drove it, it would probably fall off the spring perch and the rear end would just collapse. So good thing I'm not driving it. I'm just using it as like a storage locker right now. But here are the springs. What I'm going to be doing with these springs is, as you can see here, I got the flip kit here. So this flip kit is for a F-150, I think, a Ford. So this actually doesn't fit either perfectly. So I guess the axle for the Ford is 3 inches, I think, or 4 inches, whatever this is. So it's cut for that, but the Dodge axle isn't as thick, so there's going to be a little bit of space, so that might move around a little bit. And also this little tab here that they've got doesn't fit into the spring perch on the van, so I'm gonna have to lop that off. So I'm gonna grind that down or cut it off, whatever, make that flat, and then maybe weld on like something else that fits into the spring perch, like a little, you know, thing, so that it stops. And basically this goes under the axle, this goes over the spring perch, and then you just bolt them together. The other thing I didn't talk about was these 3500 springs. Because I'm looking for about 1 inch of lift to match my front, right? The front of the van is not as low on my new van. Yeah, the front of the new van is not as low as my old van used to be, right? Because I put a 1 inch polyurethane spring spacer in the front, so it's actually 1 inch, about 1 inch higher. So I wanted the rear to match, because on my old van right? The front and rear was pretty even. It was pretty level, I would say. So I want to match that level. So what I did, if I just use these springs, right, it's going to be the same height as my old van. So I bought, it's kind of hard to get to, so you can just see it here. I bought helper springs. These are from Tough Country. I think they're made for a Dodge truck, so I don't think those are made for this van either. But I did sort of test fit it. Definitely that should make things a lot stiffer in the rear, adding the helper, the Agoura, and this flip kit I'm hoping will work a lot better and not mangle my axle and the spring purchase too much. Hopefully they'll keep it nice and straight. And I also have a shim here, I think, somewhere. It's in here somewhere. I don't know exactly where, but I did buy a 2-degree shim to sort of rotate the differential a little bit so it goes into the transmission straighter. Alright, so here is one of the finished springs. Got the Tough Country Agoura there at the very bottom. Added that, right? And then we have the shim, 2 degrees. I've prepped the flip kit for the most part. I cut off these knobs that were sticking out, excuse me, oh man, so that it would lay flush on top of the spring perch. I think I'm gonna have to add some sort of, I'm gonna line it up and I'm gonna add, maybe just weld some metal. As far as the shock mounts go, I decided it's probably gonna be easier to weld these together when they're on the car. So I'm actually gonna put them on the car, on the shock mounts, and then weld these together when they're already sort of assembled, because I figured that would probably make it a lot easier and I don't have to be as precise with my measurements and stuff. Because I tacked something together and test fit it, and it was like a little bit off here, a little bit off there, so I did that a few times and I said screw it, I'm just gonna install it and then weld the pieces together after it's installed. Well, it's the next day and I was going in to install the new shock mounts and all that stuff. I was getting ready, and as you can see here, it's one thing after another, man. One thing after another. The wheel stud broke, which I wouldn't know why it would do that. Maybe this lug nut got misthreaded when I threaded it on. Maybe it went on a little bit weird and then it got stuck, or maybe I'm just way too strong. I mean, I have been going to the gym these days, the muscles. I don't think so, but yeah, that's a bummer, man. Luckily I was able to just, instead of taking out the entire axle shaft, I was able to just take out the emergency brake and press this out with the ball joint press. So I'm glad I had everything I needed in order to do that. I need to source another stud now. I think I'm going to just source it from my old van over there, because that thing's going to the junker once I'm done with it. Just stripping it for all the parts that I can use. And so that kind of sucks, because I'm going to have to basically repeat this process that I just did here. And this was a lot easier just because this has disc brakes, so the rotor just slides off, whereas the drum, I'm going to have to take apart all the bits inside the drum in order to isolate this, in order to press out that stud. Alright, well, I got all the components set up. Got the shock extenders here with the ugly welds. Really bad. But they seem strong enough. Hopefully they hold up. I don't know. I mean, if they let go, driving without shocks isn't too bad, and I can always fix that. I'm keeping the Dodge Caravan shocks, so I could just revert to those, because I'm not changing the OEM mounts at all. These bolt on to the OEM mounts, but hopefully these work. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see how long it holds up. Pretty ghetto. And then here I have the Agoura system setup, but looking at it, I think I need to modify this because I think this Agoura is made for a Dodge Ram truck. I don't remember what year, and so they're a little bit longer, I think, than they should be, because right now, as you can see here, it's rubbing up against that thing there. And when I first put it together on the other side, I didn't really think too much of it. I was like, yeah, you know, whatever, it might rub there a little bit, but it's, you know, probably not that big a deal. It'll just create a groove in the spring, right? And over time it'll just wear, and then, you know, it'll like settle in. But then on this side though, I was kind of in a rush when I did the other side, so I didn't really inspect it that well. But on this side, there's not that much travel here. This is probably like a 1/4 inch. And when the suspension articulates, right, and the spring compresses, like this leaf is gonna move outwards and it's gonna hit up against this, whatever this thing is, right? The thing that holds all the springs together. So it looks like it sucks because I already assembled it. But what I'm gonna have to do, it looks like, is I'm gonna take this back apart and I'm gonna cut this Agoura spring maybe just about an inch on this side. Just shorten it about an inch on this side, right? So that when the spring like bends down or whatever, this spring will get longer, right? So it won't smash up into this. And then, you know, if this, you know, went out, especially because let's say the spring hit this thing and it put a bunch of force on the center bolt, and then that gave way, then this whole spring pack would explode, right? And that's not good, especially if I'm going down the highway, especially if I went over a bump or something and then it exploded. That'd definitely not be safe. So yeah, I'm gonna cut about maybe an inch or so off of this side, just to kind of give it a little bit more room to wiggle. And then on this side, I thought, since I'm cutting one side already, I'm gonna go ahead and cut this side as well. And I'm gonna cut it down to maybe about here, somewhere around here, right? To give it about an inch of travel on this side as well. So I'll measure it, and 1 inch should be fine. I mean, I don't think the van is gonna, you know, come down all that much. And even if, because this is curved, so even if it's straightened all the way, I don't think it's gonna articulate a full inch either way. Alright, so I got the Agoura cut down. I think that should be plenty of space for it to articulate, unless the spring completely like flops over and becomes like completely flat, which I highly doubt. I don't think it can even travel that much because of the shackle on the rear end doesn't bend back that far, so it would probably hit the body before that. And also the bump stops would stop it from completely, you know, losing all of its arch and being completely straight. So I think that's pretty safe. That's not gonna hit that much. Maybe should have ground down these edges a little bit so they're a little bit more smooth, so it's not, you know, grinding into the top spring there, but it should be fine. It'll just wear naturally. And yeah, this side too looks good. And yeah. Alright, so I got the flip kit pretty much mocked up in there. It's not really mocked up, actually it's installed. I had to weld a little, what do you call it, like a pin sort of thing, and I just used the, you know, the welding wire to just create a like a tower basically of metal. But a pin for this thing to drop into on the spring perch, there's a hole, and it's like a locator basically, and it keeps it from sliding around too much. So I didn't think I really needed it, but you know, safety precautions or whatever, obviously. Modify your own car at your own risk, right? I would advise not modifying your car. It's designed from factory the way that it is for a reason. Any modifications to it, you're changing you know, the safety and drivability of it. Sometimes it's improved, you know, depending on which company you buy parts from. If they've done the research and tested and whatnot, you know, R&D, they spent money figuring things out, right? And if it's proven to handle better or whatever, increase your car's acceleration or whatever it is, then you know, it might be worth the money. But as you can see here, this is a hack job. This is a complete hack job. So you know, do not follow my advice. I'm just modifying my own car within the parameters of what I think is safe, which isn't much. I mean, I've been to you know, I've done a lot of mechanic work, and I fixed a lot of cars, and you know, I've modified cars as well, so I kind of know what works. But this is kind of a first for me, but I think this setup will be better than the setup that I had before, because before I just had the bottom plate, right? I didn't have this top sandwich plate, and the bottom plate I had to modify as well to make it fit, and then I welded that onto the axle, and I think that worked. You know, it worked fine. It had some issues before I welded it because it was kind of sliding around in there, and it would actually hit up against the spring perch during large bumps and stuff. And so this weld right here, this tab right here, this actually lifted up. So the spring perch was actually lifting up off the axle and breaking its welds. So I didn't like that, because eventually, you know, over time, maybe it might take 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, whatever, but over time the spring perch would completely come off, right, at some point. So I wanted to avoid that this time. So when I saw this kit, which is, again, it's for F-150, the 2006 I think to 2009 model, you can find it online on like Jegs or whatever, Summit Racing. But this had a top sandwich plate, which I thought would, you know, sort of keep everything together. I still ended up welding the bottom plate thingy to the axle. It's not a very good weld because I don't have a stick welder. I really should invest in a stick welder. They're pretty cheap, so then I can make welds like this right here. Big fat lines that, you know, it doesn't matter if it's pretty or not. This weld's actually pretty well done. But yeah, so pretty much this is gonna be how it is, and then I'm gonna go ahead and test fit the spring now and see how that fits inside of here. Alright, so there it is. That's the complete rear suspension system. I've actually been driving around on it for about a week, maybe about 500 miles, so I'm gonna go ahead and tighten the U-bolts down just so that, you know, it's locked in, and maybe try tightening these. Maybe I think they're okay, but I might just give them like a quarter turn or something. But yeah, this is pretty much the system. It's 3,500 springs for a Dodge cargo van with a add-a leaf from Tough Country. I think it's made for a Dodge truck. I don't remember exactly. I could probably find the model number later, but I don't remember exactly. And then I cut them so that they would fit and that they wouldn't knock up against, you know, these brackets or whatever. And then the overload spring on the bottom. And then this is a F-150 flip kit for a Ford, 2009 I think. And this was the adapter that lets you flip your springs to the bottom. And then got the plate there. And then I added a 2-degree shim from DJM. So yeah, that all seems like everything's working. Got the shock extenders. I had to customize these to fit. And then this has been working out really well. Bump stops trimmed down about 1 inch, and then just kind of triangled off so it's not flat, so that if it does bump into the axle, then there's going to be a little bit more cushion instead of just smacking up against it. So yeah, I would say I would call that done. I should probably take off this wheel and recheck the brakes, because when I swapped out a wheel stud on this side, when I started driving again, the brake light came on, and I have an ABS light as well. So maybe while I was in there changing out the wheel stud, I must have, you know, messed something up, and now those lights are on. But the brakes do work. They work fine. So I'm probably going to do that later, just because right now it's crazy hot, and I'm pretty tired, so I'm just gonna call it a day after I just tighten these up a little bit and just check all my connections, make sure nothing's, you know, messed up. But yeah, that's pretty much all it is in the rear. As far as the drop goes, alright, so here's the drop. It looks pretty good. I think the front might be slightly higher than the rear. Let's show you the other side. This side is a little bit more loaded, so I think it's a little bit lower, but the fender is pretty much right at the tire. There's not a whole lot of space there, but it's tucked a little bit because I don't have the spacers on, and so there's no rubbing. And in the front, it's less of a drop because of that 1-inch spacer, but yeah, you know, pretty good. So I'll go on level ground at some point and measure from the bottom, the ground, to the fender, the body, and the same thing in the rear. I think it's pretty even. If anything, I think the front might be slightly higher. The last time I measured, it looked like they were both about the same, so I'm pretty happy with that. Yeah, so the ride is really stiff. It almost feels like a passenger car now, like a BMW. Almost, not quite. But yeah, I don't think the outer leafs are really causing any sort of damage. I don't really hear any weird noises. Oh, the only thing I would say that's negative about the setup is if you look here under where the transmission is. Can you guys see that? So there, as you can see, the yoke of the drive shaft is pushed pretty far into the receiving end, and so I think usually there's, you know, like two inches or so of yoke that you can see, the slip yoke. But I mean, I've been driving around trying to break it in a way, and I haven't bottomed out yet, so I guess that's a positive thing. Ideally, I think I would want maybe at least an inch more clearance, so the yoke, you would see about an inch more of the yoke outside of the tail shaft. But you know, what can you do? I don't think it's bottoming out though, so I'm gonna kind of drive it around like that some more, and you know, see if it bottoms out or not, and I could just get, you know, the drive shaft shortened a little bit if I have to, maybe just about an inch or two, but that's slid in pretty far, so hopefully it just doesn't bottom out, and I'll keep monitoring that and seeing how that goes. But yeah, that's gonna be it for this episode. Just lowered the rear, pretty easy stuff, and yeah, thanks for watching.